lens.
Okay.
I would love to just share that I am constantly and continuously educating myself on the relationship to the land, the culture, the language, and I'm very honored that although my ancestors' feet did not walk on this land, that I am able to walk softly and continue to learn on this incredible part of the planet. Before we begin, I would also love to acknowledge Allison O'Toole for receiving the BC Achievement Community Award, and I've seen huge excitement, and I've also seen postings of what's happening next year, and I've heard rumblings of alumni coming back, so I think it's going to be quite exciting. And then I would love to call for the adoption of the agenda. Trustee Dalton, seconded. Trustee Beal, all in favor? So moved, wonderful. And then I would like to pass this to Superintendent Samuel to introduce our wonderful guests.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, we have a presentation on changing results for young children. And we have Roberta Edzurza, who will be joining me with Lisa Scher and Sarah Callum. All yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having us and for hearing our story. And we like to say that this is a story because when we're working with this initiative, we are telling the story of a child in our class or in our early learning program. What is Changing Results for Young Children is a provincial initiative that is in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the United Way, and started 8 years ago provincially, and we've been involved with it from the beginning. We have had in the past a provincial facilitator work with we've had two different facilitators work with our program, and then this past year I was the provincial facilitator. And I've always been a part of it for the 8 years as the early learning lead, as well as teaching kindergarten full-time. And so this year I took on the other role of facilitating. So yeah, it keeps me very busy, of course. The initiative is also under the direction of Maureen Dockendorf and Sharon Jarosky. And the framework originally was presented from Kim Schoner-Reichel, who is an expert in social emotional learning. And that's how the initiative developed, was following the framework from her research around the 7 facets of social emotional learning and how we as educators can bring that to our programs. And so each participant, which is a combination of kindergarten teachers, early learning educators such as Strong Start or preschools from Prince Rupert. We've also had participants from Metlakatla in the past, and they come together and they look at a child in their program or classroom that they just have questions about and they have wonders about and they'd like to learn more about. And then through that, they look at the facets of social emotional learning and decide what they would like to focus on. So it might be empathy and kindness, for example, or self-advocacy, just depending on what they feel would benefit that child. And then from there, they use resources and activities that help support that child, and then as well support the whole class. And so my role is just bringing it all together so that everyone has a voice in the initiative. And what makes it unique to our district is that we work together very collaboratively. So there's myself, there are the educators, as well as the Indigenous Education Department. And then by doing that, we bring together the early learning framework, the First Peoples Principles of Learning, and then the curriculum as well. And I think that brings me to my colleague, Roberta.
So throughout the year and previous years, we continue the learning about what relevant and authentic resources are. So the learning's always building on top of each other. And it's a collaborative effort and nature in choosing which books to, each person who is participating does get a book and a book or two. But it's around that theme of the book for how, what Lisa had talked about, connected to the inquiry, the students, their work, whether it's in the community. We have other community members joining too. I don't know their names, but it's a whole list. I think it's our biggest group so far this year. But yeah, so this is just a small collection of some of the books that we look at and go deeper into and really connect it to Tsimshian ways of knowing and learning to our territories. So the Majagali, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. If you can get your hands on it, it's just fabulous to look at, but they take the language of that territory and we go through the book also, and then we figure out different ways of how connecting to the facets and connecting to Tsimshian ways of being, our language, our culture, our harvesting. And another example of ways that we connected to local language and culture. And not sure, what did we do with this session?
This was the Hobie with the Moontilt.
Oh, yes, that's right. That was each, and Lisa, she humbly introduced herself. So back when we did have a provincial facilitator, they would send us a provincial facilitator and come together and help lead our group. But over time, she's like, you guys have Lisa, you know what you're doing, you're good to go. Indigenous Education Department and all the teachers are, they're right in with Indigenous ways of knowing, they're making it local, they're making it relevant. And it's always hands-on learning, it's out on the land and the territory, so they were just kind of thinking, you guys are
We're
good
self-sufficient.
yeah, so we just continued that way, and when Lucy is part of our team, she's on maternity leave right now, she would help us in this type of learning also. That's it for that. So this is how, and Tina is not with us today here, so she has a vast knowledge of language and culture. And so that's just talking about Smellick and territory and our oral narratives and how the seasonal rounds really contribute to this learning also. So Hatley and then some Smellick words that are connected to the inquiry and the session that we're doing for that time. We meet 6 times per year. And it's usually after school because it's hard to get a TTOC. And yeah.
And then we have dinner.
Awesome.
But that slide 2 is an example of an activity we did with the group where everyone brought in their observations of their wonder child. And then we went around and we looked at everybody's observations and decided what facets fit those observations. So each session is a lot about professional development and what educators can learn from each other as well.
So I'm going to talk about Wonder Child observations, my Wonder Child observation in particular. My name is Sarah Kavlak. This is my 2nd year participating in the program. I just really love the connections I was able to make with our school district's Aboriginal Education Department and other early learning educators that I was excited to come back for a 2nd year. In choosing my Wonder Child, like Lisa mentioned, I just looked for a student in my classroom that I had a curiosity about. And then I had some conversations with the family to make sure that they were on board with me doing these observations as well. This year I chose a student who was having a fair bit of separation anxiety from home. But she was still really outgoing with me personally. And I wanted to figure out how I could foster helping her build relationships, in particular friendships with her peers. So I started out just doing some observations, just looking, listening, and not so much engaging, not leaving her, but just to see what I was noticing. So sometimes I would take notes on conversations she was having, lots of photographs. I also found it was really helpful if I took a video and I went back and reviewed. And I found that in taking the videos, it also helped me with my assessments overall for the class. So I've really started taking a lot more video ongoingly of everyone, because I'm able to better capture student voice more authentically that way. So once I kind of had a little bit of listen about what's going on, I was able to bring in some elements that could start to help my students. So one of the things that we selected was a basket of calming things that she could use if she was feeling anxious about this. And we also had some normalization of the conversations she was saying. So it's okay to miss somebody, but we can still be comfortable in the classroom. You can play and you can miss somebody as well. So we would take little observations of the growth over time and just kind of see how that was going and changing. And at the end, we did like a little observation panel and celebrating all the different ways that she had changed. So this student in particular had a large amount of success. And she was no longer being timid. She was able to develop a large friend group and is very comfortable today in the classroom.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And the other thing too is just that whatever, you know, Sarah was doing with that particular child, she was also doing with the whole class. So everyone's benefiting, even though the inquiry is around one child. Also in our Strong Start centers, the educators have adopted it because the children are more transient. And so they're focusing on the actual facet and then observing all the different children who are coming through. Just so that they don't lose out on those observation times. And so this slide is just an example of how we receive materials from the Indigenous Education Department. So this was little plushies, beautiful plushies that we were all given a set of, and then we take them back to the classroom and then see how the children are using the materials. And so for each session, I just made sure that all the participants had an activity that they could try the next day if they wanted to, so that it's very practical for them. And so what makes this a successful program? So many things, as you heard from Sarah, that's a huge success story just for one child, but there have been so many. I've worked with children who, same thing, separation anxiety or just not having a voice. And so it's just really given us like a platform to help develop those social emotional skills. And then as well, just being able to work as a team. We're pretty unique in Prince Rupert. Not all districts do it this way, where we all work together, as well as Susan Kobsa as well through early learning. She's also a support to our initiative as well. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add to that. I think the other thing just around social emotional learning that Kim Schoner-Reichel uses is that this is the plate. We're not adding to the plate, but this is the plate and everything else is a bonus. So just when you make that your focus in your classroom, then all the other pieces can come together. I think for me, that's the advantage of it.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Well, that's just awesome. Well, I mean, that story almost teared me up there. Because I know there's so many children that I guess they come to school and we think that they're ready for it or they're going to integrate with other children, but I'm glad that you've undertaken this project. I think it's so important. We want kids to feel safe at school. We want kids to belong at school. We want kids to excel at school, right? That's why we're here, is to do our best to ensure that we provide the best tools that we can provide,
That
right?
we're ready.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We're,
Yeah.
yeah.
Trustee Horn, I just want to thank you so much. I think I've known this. I remember when this program was called Different Things. And Maureen Dockendorf, I think, is absolutely incredible, as is Kim Schoner-Reichel. And just some beautiful language. I think I've always loved that it's called your wonder child, like that almost makes me want to cry, right? I know that Christine's really familiar with all of this work and yeah, and that it is strength-based and that it is all social and emotional learning. And then just the way you shared your collaboration and how beautifully you're weaving together departments and learning and people. And yeah, thank you so much. So lovely. And it's really cool that you're the lead.
thank you.
Yes, trustee Sanchez.
Boy, I really have to congratulate you people for that everything. It has taken me back a long time ago when we were doing the same thing that you are talking about. But I just had a conversation with my trustee sitting beside me. And she was wondering, I mean, I understand the program that you're doing because I was part of it and I really enjoyed it. The fact that those kids are able to come up and be able to speak and not afraid to say anything and participating. And at the same time, they're getting everything. They're getting the language, they're getting the math, they're getting everything. But my partner here is concerned in terms, and maybe you can answer that for her. Where is the math and where is the reading in the program?
I need to interject.
Go ahead.
My concern is when they're over 18 and I get them and they can't read, they can't do math, they can't fill out an application, they don't know what a capital is. And I have some big problems with that. I was wondering at what point is that starting? I don't think it might be too much of a problem right over here that way. Some beautiful things over there. That's a good question. Wonder exactly where did they fall off? What's happening? Why can't they read? I find it astonishing that our student cannot read. And so that is what I was discussing with trustee. Where does it start?
Want me to
Well, it's gonna be more than. I would have.
Yeah.
An hour.
It's a big question. I can just share for as far as kindergarten teachers go. That this initiative is not the only thing we're doing in our classroom. But what we're saying, I think, is that when we focus on the social emotional learning first and we develop those skills and we help children be confident and respectful of each other and themselves, then the learning can happen. But if we don't have that sort of like community feel first as a classroom, it's hard not for all children. Some children, it doesn't matter. They can just come in and learn however whatever the situation is. But for many of our kids, especially now since COVID, and then also just a whole new society that we're teaching in with all different kinds of children and families, that this is just the start. And then once we have our children feeling safe and comfortable, then we can bring in the literacy and the numeracy. We're doing literacy and numeracy every day in kindergarten in all different ways. But this is just like a base. It's like your base. If you're doing a collage, you need a base for everything to stick to. This is like the base.
I totally believe that, understand. I'm positive this is exactly what we're doing. What's happening with the rest?
Yeah. That's a bigger question than.
That was my
than
bigger
for us.
question, thank you.
But I can assure you, being a teacher many, many years ago, it's the same thing that I did in my classroom. And it worked. So it's hard. It's hard for me to take it to say that they're not reading, because by the time we were finished in kindergarten, they were reading. Through those same programs that you are talking about. So I don't understand. I just don't understand, because I know those programs do work. And if you don't have the skills, that the kindness and the empathy towards each other, it doesn't work. I think what we should do is to maybe get some visitors to come into your schools. I don't see that happening anymore. I was kicked out because I'm taking away a teacher's job, so I can't go back into the classroom. And it's so sad when you can see you people are doing an excellent job, and kudos to you. And I know it's a good job, and I know it's a good program.
One child at a time.
And yeah,
One
and thank you,
child at a
trustee
time.
Sanchez and trustee Dalton. And just to share, it's not about not having community in the classroom. It's that we have a special role. And it's this role going into the classroom, which is, and trustee Horn, are you able to speak?
I think so. Thank. I'd like to thank you guys for coming in and presenting to us today. I don't think we hear enough about what the work that you do. And great that you're able to present and show to the public what you do. So thank you very much for that. I love that, Lisa, that you got to do provincial presentation. I think that's fantastic. And thank you very much for taking the effort to do that. And the fact that we're being collaborative with Roberta's Indigenous Education Group and the Indigenous Ways of Learning. I think that's fantastic as well. And also thank you to Sarah, your comment that you saw the connections and encourage you to return is such a great thing. So thank you all for presenting to us today and showing us your good work. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Warren. And I just would love to share, I was talking with Sarah, and my understanding is for many, 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 many years, she was teaching high school science. And this is the prep. Yes, prep. And this is her second year kindergarten, so quite a shift. And we had wonderful sharing at Ready, Set, Learn. And I just was able to observe her class out on a walk, and how much social and emotional support was happening during that walk was absolutely incredible. So thank you so much. Thank you. Stay.
I don't think.
You don't have to stay.
It's gonna be a long one.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you. Enjoy the sun. All right, so number 3, approval of the minutes of the open board meeting. And just before I ask for approval, I do have a couple of amendments, I believe, just on the 8.2. The trustees on that committee are Horn and Toy, and then the 8.5 policy committee, the trustees on that are Horn and Sanchez. So approval of the open board meetings as
The minute
amended.
as amended. I'll
Thank
make
you.
that motion.
And would you like to speak to that motion or
No.
anything to note? Great, and I do, maybe for a future discussion, I would love to revisit 10.1 as I wasn't at this meeting, and I am a bit confused by that. The wording here around this BCSTA motion, so maybe something to revisit as we move into new motions for the next AGM. So we have a mover as amended and a seconder, trustee Sanchez, and all in favor? Great. Thank you. For Item 4, necessity of closed meeting and agenda.
Make a
Trustee
motion.
Veal. Great. Seconder, trustee Meyer, all in favor? Wonderful. Correspondence addressed to the board, we have none, and then copied to the board, we have quite a few. 5.2.1, a letter from SB 78 to the Minister of Education and Childcare, which is of the board, page 9 in your package. Trustee Meyer?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion just to write a letter of support. Our acting secretary treasurer in the last meeting, or in a couple of meetings ago, gave us a presentation on how this unique district funding and how that it's not funded enough, I think cost our district 121,000, I believe it is, every year, and will continue. So yeah, I'd like to write a letter.
Wonderful.
I'll
Seconded,
second that.
trustee Beal. Great. All in favor? So moved. Anyone else care to speak to that, trustee Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this indeed involves the issue that we were talking about at the last meeting. And along with a letter of support, I would like to see our board write our own letter in regards to this funding. As it is,
Hold on, point of order, point of
Yes.
order. We've already passed a motion, so he'd have to make another
Right.
motion.
and
So,
that-
great.
Just keeping it straight there.
thank you. I'd like to see us do more than just what that motion says, because this is costing us an awful lot of funding due to the not funding us properly. And I believe that we should be very aggressive on not only supporting this letter, but also supporting ourselves in our own effort to make this funding better for us.
Thank you, trustee Horn. So currently we have a motion on the floor to write a letter of support. And we have a seconder. All in favor?
You already did all in favor.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
That's why he shouldn't have talked. That's why
Now,
I'm
are
making the
we
point of order.
asking, would you like to make a motion?
So I would like to make such motion that we write a similar type letter. Andrew would be the one who would know the details of it. But that because of the funding that we're losing in the same respect as this.
Wonderful. Seconder for that motion? Trustee Beal? Would anyone else like to speak to that? Wonderful. So all in favor for writing our own letter? So moved. Thank you, trustee Horn.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion for the next
Great.
To do a
5.2.2.
5.2.2 through 5.2.8 are all similar letters. They're letters that's been sent to the ministry in that respect to do with childcare.
Just 5.2.5 is regarding funding, as is 5.2.8.
Oh, she did, sorry, I
Yes.
asked her to change them around.
So
Okay,
would you like
I'll
to
just
go
make
line by
it a
line?
block actually, I guess I'll just receive and file 5.2.2.
Do you have a seconder to receive and file? Trustee Meyer? All in favor? So moved. Thank you. 5.2.3, page 13. Wishes of the board? Trustee Meyer,
Just a motion to receive and file.
seconded. Trustee Dalton, all in favor? So moved. 5.2.3, page, sorry, did I miss that? Was that 5.2.2?
Yeah.
Sorry, 5.2.2, page 11. We are now on 5.2.3, page 13, which is of the board.
Receive and file, please.
Thank you, seconder.
First standard.
Thank you. All in favor? So moved. 5.2.4, page 15. Wishes of the board.
Motion to
Trustee Meyer,
receive and file.
motion to receive and file, seconder. Trustee Sanchez, all in favor? So moved. Wonderful. April 13th letter, 5.2.5, page 17.
Receive and file.
This is speaking of funding model.
I,
Receive
one
and file.
reason, if there's no sense in, sorry, Madam Chair, just indulge me for a moment. With us going into provincial election, there's really, it's a non-starter. I mean, to bring the funding model back at this point, we've been dealing with the funding model for the last, I don't know how many years that I went. At this point, I think we need to wait for a new government, if it's this current government, if it's a new government, and then address it through our own correspondence.
Trustee Horn,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, trustee Beal's correct. There is election coming up, so there won't likely be any change. It doesn't mean, though, that this doesn't affect us severely in ways of our funding, which we will be tight for funding. And I think we should keep that in mind. It's not only this letter, but there's a similar letter, page 22, which talks about the same idea as this one. And I think we need to keep in mind that we need to pressure the government and BCSDA as best we can to improve our funding through the new funding model, should it ever come out to us. Thank you.
so we have a motion on the floor, moved by trustee Beal, seconded by trustee Horn. Yes, and speaking to it is trustee Meyer.
Yeah, I think, I'm in favor of the motion, and I think we need to keep it in the back of our head for possibly like an AGM motion, regarding this, as well as our unique district funding. So just put it in the back of your head and we can start that work in September.
Thank you, trustee Meyer, and I will speak to that we have started a list at the AGM.
Yeah.
And this is definitely part of what we are wanting to see.
Put it out there.
Would anyone else like to speak to this? Not seeing anyone, so we have a motion to receive and file, approved? Sorry, all in favor? Approved. Thank you. 5.2.6, page 19.
Motion to receive and file.
Great, seconder. Trustee Dalton, would you care to speak to this? All in favor? Approved. 5.2.7. Page 20 in your package. Regarding student voice. Trustee Meyer,
I'll make a motion to receive and file.
seconder. Trustee Beal. All in favor? So moved. And finally, 5.2.8, spoken to a little bit by trustee Horn and wishes of the board. Trustee Meyer,
I'll make a motion to receive and file for all the same reasons as the last funding.
wonderful. And seconded. Trustee Dalton. All in favor? So moved. Thank you. Superintendent of Schools report.
Madam Chair, at this time, I yield the floor to Acting Superintendent Sandra Font.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
1.1.1 field trips, page 24. The first one for Charles Hayes, that's listed there is actually for March 27th, April 6th, 2025, and will need board approval.
And we would find that in our package. Would we be doing this at this moment? Yes, as wishes.
Yes,
Wonderful. Trustee Meyer,
So I'll make a motion to approve the field trip March 27th, April 6th, 2025.
seconder. Trustee Sanchez, would you care to speak for this motion?
We saw at our last meeting how great this was with Experience Canada, so I'm all for it.
Anyone else like to speak to this motion? Not seeing anyone, all in favor? So moved.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me because I jumped ahead. That should have been 6.1.2. So back to 6.1.1, the field trips that are happening for the remainder of the year. Any questions that anyone has about those?
Yes, please.
Yes, trustee Horn.
The number 9, the inland air. Can you talk a little bit about what the idea of that, if you don't know exactly what it is at this point?
Yeah, it hasn't been, the date is not set yet. This one is a harbor tour, so it's, when I first saw it, I thought, students up in an airplane, that's a high risk activity, and then I thought, but it's in our harbor, so I don't know if that's, yeah, so that's what that's all about.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Great. Seeing none, 6.1.3 is enrollment. And over there, I have my, I've got things out of order. There we go. So I've been putting in this graph, and it's kind of interesting to see the graph on page 26 and how we're trending this year. It's this year, 2023, 24 is the green line. So you can see we started out the year in September at the lowest enrollment that we've had for startup. But it's been improving and it's sort of leveled out. So that's encouraging. So we're currently at 1,848 students, and 61% of those students are Indigenous, 1,124. Anyone have any questions about that? Not seeing any. And 6.1.4. I have a lot of things to share today, so I think I might just leave the last piece until next month, because otherwise this meeting is going to go very long. But just to share that in our schools, in our secondary schools, Charles Hayes participated in the PISA assessments this last month, and students were also writing their literacy and numeracy grad assessments. The provincial student learning survey closed for this year, and we'll be looking forward to getting that data in the summer. So that's, and you know, we share in our cycle of a continuous improvement. These assessments are part of that, and checking in to see how our students are doing. And we will be doing a lot of work on that this next year as we work on our framework and on our enhancing student learning report. Students celebrated Earth Day in the schools in many different ways. Some wearing blue and green, some planting seedlings, some just getting outside. And most of our schools now have garden projects happening. So if you go visit the schools, you'll see all kinds of things sprouting. It's really quite encouraging. Schools are also hosting all kinds of events for families, such as family nights and scholastic fairs. And there's a couple of the schools are still doing soup and sandwich lunches in their child's classroom, which is really, really well received by the families. Lori and Roberta have shared a few things about Indigenous education and what's been happening. As some of you we should all be aware of, I guess, we signed the LEA on April the 8th. And this agreement outlines the shared goals and priorities for our students from Metlakatla. So that was a pretty, everyone that went absolutely loved the event. I missed it, unfortunately. I was very sad not to be there. The Indigenous Ed team co-hosted about learning in a Tsimshian context for all of our new uncertified teaching staff. So when we do training, they're doing a piece of that training. The seasonal rounds are continue to be taught by curriculum specialists in various schools with the help of classroom teachers. And this is an example of the use of Indigenous pedagogies in our classrooms and connecting to the territory, to Tsimshian place-based practice. Linda Gray was here and did some professional development work as well as visiting classes and PCS and at Charles Hayes. And if you don't know, Linda Gray wrote First Nations 101. So a book well worth reading. What Sigaget staff facilitated the cultural trolley tour again. This is the last professional development day. And Brendan Turner co-hosted an Indigenous focused course session at WAP Sigaget. The Tsimshian Sniak Language Authority had a symposium a couple weekends, Roberta, ago. Yeah.
Mid-April.
Yeah, mid-April. In partnership with Wapsigaget for Sniak language leaders, and we heard a lot of really great things came out of that. They were at Charles Hayes. And we have two student groups started, the PCS student group and the Charles Hayes Young Matriarchs group that are using the spirals of inquiry as a framework for making change. So lots going on. In early learning, the ECE dual credit program is happening now at Charles Hayes, but will continue again next year. So we'll be hearing more about that. We've let parents know that there's a childcare pilot happening this summer. We're just trying to assess interest in that and see if their families will participate. And Ready, Set, Learn sessions for preschoolers, 3 to 4 year olds have been happening in all of the schools. And also, I think we had a session at the new outreach center.
It was great.
Yeah, good. And the French programs update, they sent everybody sent me updates. That's why I've got so much to say. They've been working with AFNO to organize an Ontario Franco musical artist to come to Northwest BC for February 2025. So LaFlo Franco, the hip hop artist. So that'll be interesting to have in our district next year. And to widen the audience to attract potential French immersion families, the French immersion info pamphlet is being translated into Punjabi and Vietnamese with the hopes to also translate it into Ukrainian and Hindi in the future. So that's kind of cool. And as of April 15, they wanted to report that they have 14 students signed up for the French immersion kindergarten for next year. And that the district will be bringing Métis dancers to perform for National Indigenous Peoples Day in June. So, I think I have time to do this last one. The last piece I've been doing is focusing on the priorities of the strategic plan, which is the board's plan. And priority number 2 from the strategic plan is to strengthen our commitment to truth and reconciliation. So this is the section where I've been talking about data. So how do we collect data on that? That's a good question. Right now, we use the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the calls to action as a guide as we look at system practices and barriers that are inequitable, as well as the Equity and Action Workbook to guide the work that's happening in our district, in our schools, in our classrooms at the district level, and in our schools and our classrooms. The kind of data we have for this priority is largely qualitative or anecdotal. It's important to first understand the impact of residential schools and the Indian Act, and as such, take action. Taking action will arise out of our growing understandings. Staff are given opportunities to learn at implementation and professional development days. Teachers have taken courses to support their learning so they can teach the Indigenous focused grad courses. And the Indigenous Ed Department strongly recommends that teachers that are teaching those courses attend ongoing individual and small group meetings to support their learning. Two of our teachers, Lori Berger and Brendan Turner, went to Vancouver to take the trainer sessions with Finesse, so that now they are part of the group that's training our teachers. So that's a good news story. Many of our staff are also taking advantage of MOOCs, which are massive online open courses offered by post-secondary institutions, such as Reconciliation Through Indigenous Education at UBC. And our young leaders groups at Charles Hayes and PCS are also meeting to focus on the work of truth and reconciliation. So there's lots going on. We also support Jordan's Principle for students and families, encourage the continued development of Indigenous curriculum, and are proud of the language and culture work we're connected to with the Tsimshian Language Authority. In recent meetings with the ministry, Roberta and Jit and I met with them for a day and a half and have been encouraged and feel determined that we will collect more robust qualitative data to give evidence that the objectives and strategies we're implementing for this priority are moving us forward towards improvement. So we have work to do, always.
Thank you so much for that fulsome report. Any questions for Ms. Pond?
Lots going on.
Yeah. Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And does that conclude your superintendent report?
Includes my superintendent.
Yes, that concludes my report.
On to item 7, Secretary Treasurer Report.
Thank you. So item 7.1 is the April 2024 expenditure report on page 27. So these are your two regular monthly reports. The first report is the expenditures by program. And the second report is the expenditures by category. So I will note, looking at this one, the variances of the percentage remaining expected looks better on this report than it did on the prior month's reports. The reason for that is we were able to figure out the reallocation that needed to be done between the different categories. So for example, the substitute salary was previously off. What we found was a couple of our staff were being classified as substitutes because they are classified as casuals. But for accounting purposes, it's more accurate to account for them as full-time employees. So for example, some of our substitute salary was transferred over to support staff salary in this report. Another area that I had an adjustment this month was the educational assistant salary. So what this change was related to was the Jordan's Principle funding, or sorry, expenses. So previously they weren't being allocated to this operating EA account, and in this month that was corrected as well. And then if you just go down the list of the different categories and the percentage remaining expected. So for the 10-month categories, for example, teachers, we should expect about a 20% remaining. And the 12-month categories, they should have about 17%. Do you have any questions on that before I move on?
Trustee Horn?
Thank you, Brittany, for your work on this report and for getting the numbers for us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Not seeing any further questions.
Okay, moving on. Just checking, is my volume okay too? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So item 7.2, 24-25 annual facilities grant plan, that is on page 29. So we actually presented this information at last month's board meeting.
We realized though that last year we had actually provided it in a different format. So last year we had provided this summary page, so we thought we'd provide it here in that same format just for consistency. So this first page is the summary. And then if you go to the second page, it shows that listing that we had provided previously, just with an added column on the far left to show which category it falls under. Any questions on that?
Trustee Horn? Yes, trustee Horn?
Thank you again, Brittany. And I really like the summary page. It shows everything and it spells out what we're doing and it shows all the expenditures. I really like that. Can you give a quick rundown? I know you did this at the last meeting, but please, again, for the funding part itself, the special purpose grant, 135, the capital grant is 731, and capital asset management system withheld 11,000. Can you give just a quick brief description there, please?
Yeah, so the special purpose grant that is going to wages. The 124,000 is going to wages, and then that 11,000 that you see is going towards the capital asset management system. Which is a system provided to us by the ministry, so the ministry just automatically deducts that off of our grant amount. And then the capital grant, 731,000, that is how we allocate the rest of our planned spending. So James works on that listing at the bottom, and that's where we have the IT projects, health and safety, building maintenance, etc.
Thank you.
And just for clarity, these special purpose grants and funding have to be used for what they are designated for. Correct? Just for clarity for the public.
James, do you want to speak to this, or would you like me to?
Sure, yes, these special purpose grants are only for building improvements and improving our capital assets and can't be used for any other purposes except for building maintenance, repairs and improvements.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't see any further questions on that one, Brittany.
Perfect. Moving on, 7.3, 24-25 capital plan bylaw. So this is on page 31 and 32 of your package. So the first page is the capital plan bylaw. On the second page, it actually shows the listing of these reports. So these are the minor capital projects. And I'll open up for any questions.
I just have a clarification. The last one, Roosevelt Park Elementary. My understanding is that isn't the facility name for the kitchen equipment. Is that correct?
I believe you are correct, James. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is.
Yes, that's
Accurate.
correct. It started because Roosevelt is our district kitchen currently. And now that we have a new location for it, then we'll be changing that language eventually.
And so is it fine to stay this way and then, but it's all right to amend it as needed?
I believe so.
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
It is.
Thank you. And your wishes, Ms. Versamel?
Well, it's the vice chair of the
Thank you.
finance committee's wishes now.
It's actually the chair of the finance.
Oh, yeah, I forgot I'm the chair of the finance. Excuse me. I don't like spending money, but I guess you're sitting next to me, might kick me. So I'd like to make a motion that we do all 3 readings tonight.
Great. Do you have a seconder for that? Trustee Meyer? And all in favor for 3 readings? So moved.
So I'll make a motion to read the capital bylaw number 2425 CPSD 5201 capital plan 2024-25 for first time. My first.
21st.
May 21st, what did I say?
You didn't see.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. Read for first time, May 21st. I got that right, not the 22nd. I'm checking that.
Oh, sure, yes.
Do we ask all in favor? at this
Yes,
time?
yes.
All in favor?
First time.
Great.
I'd like to read it a second time this day, the 21st of May, 2024.
Seconder? Trustee Dalton, all in favor?
And I'd like to read it a third and pass it this 21st day of May, 2024.
Great. And a seconder, trustee Sanchez. And all in favor? Approved. Thank you very much.
Next item, 7.4, 25-26 major capital programs resolution. So this is on page 33. And there's 3 items listed there: Conrad seismic project, Pine Ridge seismic project, and the Prince Rupert Middle School replacement. Any questions regarding that?
I'd like to make a motion that we pass.
Sorry, trustee Horn, are you okay?
Oh,
Sorry, you're good? Wonderful, thanks. Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we pass resolution in accordance with provisions under section 142 School Act, the Board of Education, School District 52, Prince Rupert hereby approves the purpose of 5-year major capital plans for 25-26 as provided in the 5-year capital summary for 25-26 submitted to the Ministry of Education and Child Care. And that we certify that this is a true copy of the resolution for the approval of the proposed 5-year major capital programs for 2025-26 adopted by the board on this 21st day of May 2024.
Seconder, but before you ask my question, just, is this not 24-25 or is it 2025-2026?
It's 25-26.
Sorry, 25-26. It does say 25.
Yes, it does. I just wanted clarity if that was correct.
Yeah, no, it goes to the next year.
Yes. And a seconder for that? Trustee Meyer, great, and all in favor? So moved. Thank you.
Perfect. Moving on, next item, 7.5, April 2024 Operations Department Report on page 35. Opening up for any questions.
We have James there. You can speak and you.
Trustee Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank our department, operations department, sorry, I didn't get the name right there. And James for the work that your group does in your getting the kitchen ready and the work on the school for that. And also for the use of the bus. So I see the bus is heavily getting used. And so I really like that our investment in that bus is working well for our students and getting them out and about. So thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
No, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that I can drive through our community and know that our schools are older, but they look good, you know, and I know that you and your staff do a lot of hard work to maintain old facilities, especially in a, rainforest area, but I'm pretty impressed when I go to other districts with newer schools that look a lot older than our schools. And so that just tells me that, you and your staff, like, you take pride and you care about how they look. So thank you.
Thanks, I'll pass that along to the crew.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7.6, April 2024 Information Technology Department Report on page 36. Opening up for any questions.
Dinesh is on the line if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Dinesh.
Thank you.
Yes, trustee Horn.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to also thank the IT department because just like our schools are aging, so does our IT. And they've been working very hard to keep them maintained in a way that they can be used. So I'd like to, a big thanks to the IT department overall and Dinesh. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
And I'd like to, that's ditto from me, because like you guys all seem to work very uniformly together. Building department, IT department, it's quite the crew we have, I would say that all of us that sit here tonight should be very proud of the people that work in our district, including my wonderful people that sit in the back.
That's right. Thank you very much, Dinesh. I think that the I know that the board relies on your department very much, and so I'm sure the whole
Very
district
much
does.
so.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, I knew she was gonna tell me so.
And now that he has a new office, Dinesh has a new office, great.
You're wearing his rug out.
Any questions for Dinesh?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, trustees, for participating in that multi-factor authentication that we all work together. And I appreciate that we all work on, even though there was few issues, but thank you to all of you for working on that to keep it more secure. And now pass all the hard work to our team as we all work together to keep the IT secure and the facility secure. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Dinesh.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7.7, 24-25 annual budget and bylaw. So this is on page 37 of your agenda. Or sorry, your package. 25 preliminary budget. Here's the agenda of what we'll be going over today. Superintendent Andrew Samuel will give a quick recap of our strategic plan priorities. Then we'll go over the budget timeline and meeting date schedule. Then I'll show a visual breakdown of the operating revenue and expenditures with some pie charts. Afterwards, we'll go over the budget comparison. First, we'll provide a summary, then we'll go over it in more detail. We'll discuss the operating grant. We'll go over the changes as well as provide some comparisons. Then we'll discuss the expenses and the changes there. Next, we'll go over where we expect to be at the end of the current year in terms of our reserves. I've gone over this in prior presentations, but we thought it'd be good to recap it again here. We also broke it down a bit differently today to provide a further breakdown. Then we'll go over the inclusive education and indigenous education budgets. Next, we'll go over our next steps, and afterwards we'll open up for any questions. Now I'll pass it over to Superintendent Andrew Samuel to give a recap of our strategic plan, as this is important to keep in mind throughout the budget process.
Thank you, Brittany. Trustees, of course, our priority remains closing the gap between our Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. And that is from the strategic plan that you wrote. And obviously you hold us accountable for fulfilling the obligation to ensure that the equity gap closes. And truth and reconciliation remain high on our priority because much like you heard today with the change results for young children, that there's many things that go together to help our students feel more welcome, to feel wanted in our classrooms, which I think helps to have students achieve at a higher level, and that certainly acquire reading skills at a young age. And mental health literacy, we know that the effects of COVID are still with us, and COVID is still with us. And so obviously, we have our obligations to ensure that our students are feeling good about themselves, and our staff are supported as well. What I want to add to this is that the budget information you're seeing is prepared based on, you know, as I'd say, that we are a district like many others that are between a rock and a hard place. The funding that drives the funding formula that gives us our money is based on enrollment. Our enrollment is declining. That's a demographic issue that you and I can't control. But we also have the reductions in funding and the way the ministry funds us with their funding models. And so between these two models, you know, the rope between them can only get stretched so far before it breaks. And yet here we have an example where in the meeting where we're acknowledging a particular staff member who was recognized by her peers for the work that she had done at Charles Hayes. We have many leaders, including in our room today, who have received provincial accolades from their peers and from provincial leaders in the ministry. But we need to give them those supports. And when funding is declining, there's less supports for them to do the great work that they're doing. Teachers, support staff, James Warburton's staff in maintenance, and same is for IT and for JIT and his department. So there are going to be challenges and we're going to have to look for new ways of learning. To support our students in the wide variety of programs that they're used to. It gets tougher to offer as many course selections with a declining budget. But again, it's based on declining enrollment. So, we have to look, and you'll hear from me in the future. We have to look at our underutilized buildings, our underutilized land, and we have to look at whether we can make something out of that to help us. I know it's temporary, but something to get us through until what I hope is an increase in enrollment for funding. Back to you, Brittany.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is the budget timeline slide that you're very familiar with by now. We're currently working on the preliminary budget for next year, the 24-25 school year. So the budget timeline for this is at the bottom section of this slide. So we're currently in this May to June section, which is when the board approves of the preliminary budget and they do the 3 readings of the bylaw. This is the planned annual budget consultation meeting dates approved by the board. The intention of today's presentation is to provide the board and public further information regarding the 24-25 preliminary budget and our recommendation on how to balance the budget. If the board is comfortable in doing so, our goal is to have the first budget bylaw reading done today and the second and third readings done at the next public board meeting on June 17th. Next, we will show a few pie charts to show where our revenues and expenses come from. You can see that the bulk of our funding is our operating grant, which comes from the government. Often when we're trying to balance the budget, suggestions are made to increase revenues, but the reality is that these types of revenues, such as rental income, is a very, very small part of our income. On this slide, you can see that most of our expenses are salaries and benefits. Again, when we're trying to balance the budget, people tend to focus on supplies and services. However, they're a very small portion of our budget. And this slide gives you a breakdown of how the salaries and benefits are being spent in each of the different categories. Now we will go over the budget changes summary. Here's a summary of the current year 23-24 amended budget and where we're at for next year's 24-25 preliminary budget before any staff reductions. What we've done is shown what's changed from the current year amended budget that the board approved back in February to what things look like for next year before any staff reductions. The first column is the current year 23-24 amended budget totals. For comparison purposes, the 23-24 amended budget has been restated to exclude the one-time reimbursement of the Prince Rupert Middle School project planning costs of $1.055 million, which was credited back to services and supplies in the current year. The reason we are showing these restated figures is to help better illustrate what our 23-24 amended budget figures would have looked like without the one-time $1.055 million reimbursement. The one-time credit from the ministry tends to distort what our ongoing expenses are. We actually restated this based on recommendations from the board. We really like this recommendation as it better illustrates what our expenses actually look like year to year. So kudos to the board on that. This 23-24 amended budget is our starting point when looking at next year's preliminary budget. The second column on this slide is next year's 24-25 preliminary budget totals before staff reductions. And the third column is a change between the two. For example, taking a look at the first row, this year's revenue budget is $26,442,000. And next year's is $26,735,000. And the change between the two is $293,000 increase. On the next two slides, we will go over the details regarding the $293,000 increase in provincial grants. Then we'll come back to this changes summary slide again and go over the rest of the categories in more detail. We've gone over the provincial operating grant changes in greater detail at a prior ABC meeting, but we thought it was a good idea to give a recap again today as well. Again, we'll show the same slide a couple more times in today's presentation as we explain the different sections of it. First, we are showing our enrollment trends. As student enrollment is the starting point for our budget, as it drives the bulk of revenues and expenses. One of our first steps was to determine what enrollment looks like for next year. Looking at this chart, you can see that our enrollment has been relatively stable for the last 4 years, and we expect it to remain that way for next year. This slide is an overview of our operating grant funding from the ministry. This is the basis for building our budget. As I mentioned earlier, we've gone over these provincial operating grant changes in greater detail at a prior ABC meeting, and today we'll be giving a recap again. The first section is our current year 23-24 amended budget. The second section is our next year 24-25 preliminary draft budget. The third section is the change between the two. On the far left, we listed the different categories that are included in the funding formula. For example, kindergarten to grade 12, alternate school, homeschool, etc. In each section, there's a column for the student FTE, the rate per FTE, and the total in dollars. You can see that it's also broken down into 3 components. This top section is the basic allocation. This middle section is the unique student needs allocation. And this bottom section is the unique district allocation. As you may recall, at the last ABC meeting, we went over the ministry funding formula and how the increases are allocated to each of the 3 components. This was when we also went over how the allocation isn't in favor for small rural districts like ours. We won't be going into that again today, as we went into it in great detail at our last meeting. At our last meeting, we also mentioned that the Indigenous Education Council support funding is new for next year. Our district's allocation of this funding is $72,790. We also wanted to remind you that this increase in funding has been offset by an increase in expenditures to help support the Indigenous Education Councils. We wanted to also point out on this slide that it looks like overall we are receiving an additional funding of $293,000. However, this is more than offset by the wage increases that are effective July 1st. We'll go over this in further detail when we discuss the salary and benefit changes on the next 2 slides. Now let's go back to this changes summary slide we showed 3 slides back. This is our starting point when balancing the budget for next year. Again, this is a summary of the current year 23-24 amended budget restated without the one-time reimbursement of the $1.055 million. And where we're at for next year's 24-25 preliminary budget before any staff reductions. The third column on this slide is the change between the 2. On this slide, I'll go over the total change amount in the main categories. Then on the next slide, I'll go into further detail on the breakdown of these changes. The first row is the provincial grants, and the change amount is the $293,000 increase. This is the amount we just went over in detail on the prior slide. The second row is the other revenue, and the change from the current year to next year is $196,000 increase. This brings us to a total revenue increase of $489,000. Next is the expenses. Going further down the rows, you can see that the change in the estimated total salaries and benefits is an increase of $1,022,000. Directly under that row is services and supplies. The estimated total change is an increase of $144,000. This brings us to a total expense increase of $1,166,000. There's no change to the local capital assets purchases budget. And on the very bottom row of this slide, you'll see that the current year 23-24 restated amended budget was a deficit of $447,000. And next year's 24-25 preliminary budget has a deficit of $1.123 million. Again, just as a reminder, the 23-24 amended budget has been restated to exclude the one-time reimbursement. And the total change on the bottom right-hand corner of this slide is a deficit of $676,000. We'll go over the breakdown of this change on the next slide. As I mentioned, the last slide showed the total changes of each of the categories. The total change is $676,000. On this slide, I'll now go over in further detail on the breakdown of these total change amounts. We categorize these changes into the 3 categories you can see on the column headers: wage and benefit increases, other grants revenues, and other changes. Then the last column sums these 3 columns and is the total change amount of $776,000 shown on the prior slide. First, we will go over the changes in revenue. The first row is the provincial grants. Again, this is a total increase of $293,000, which I just went over on prior slides, so I won't go over again here. We do want to point out that on this slide, we broke out the $293,000 into the 2 components. An increase of $626,000 is related to the 3% wage and benefit increase. The second row on this slide is other revenue. This has an other grants revenues total increase of $196,000. This includes offshore tuition increase of $59,000, Metlakatla LEA decrease of $56,000 due to less students, GST rebate increase of $75,000 based off of prior year actuals, Microsoft settlement grant increase of $71,000, which is offset by an increase in expenses, and bank interest increase of $47,000. The provincial grant increase of $293,000 and the other revenue increase of $196,000 brings us to a total revenue increase of $489,000, which is on the far right of the first row highlighted in blue on this side. Next, we'll go over the changes in expenses. The wage and benefit increase column shows the increase due to the 3% wage increase per the collective agreement. This 3% wage increase takes into effect on July 1st this year and is applied to all staffing categories: PRDTU, IUOE, and exempt staff. The total cost of the wage and benefits increase of $781,000. This includes cost increases for standard health and dental premiums as well. As you can see, the provincial grants wage and benefits increase of $626,000 doesn't even fully cover our total salaries and benefits increase, as our costs have increased by $781,000. Our estimated total deficit related to wage and benefits increase is $155,000. Next, we will go over the other changes column. We included a $200,000 net increase in educational assistance. This includes a $300,000 increase to correct an accounting allocation error in the current year amended budget. This is regarding the EA expenses related to the funding we received from Jordan's Principal. In the current year budget, the revenues from Jordan's Principal were recorded, however, the related expenses weren't. We also budgeted for a $100,000 decrease in EAs based on an analysis of the actual expenses in the current year. This $300,000 increase and $100,000 decrease in EAs brings us to the net change of $200,000 shown on this slide. We wanted to mention and make it clear that this column is not showing a change due to a change in FTE. This change is due to an accounting allocation correction as well as an analysis of the actual expenses in the current year. The next row shows a total services and supplies increase of $144,000. This includes Indigenous Education Council expenditures increase of $73,000 and Microsoft settlement expenditures increase of $71,000. This then brings us to our estimated total deficit related to other changes of $384,000. Adding the total operating surplus deficit amounts on the very bottom row of each of these 3 categories brings us to our total change amount of $676,000. We wanted to show this changes summary slide again here, as we wanted to highlight the figures on the very bottom row, as they're going to be included on the next slide. Again, you'll see that the 23-24 restated amended budget deficit is this $447,000, and the 24-25 preliminary budget before staff reductions is $1,123,000. Next, we will go over our reserves. You'll see those 2 numbers that I just mentioned highlighted in blue on this slide. You've seen this slide before, however, we've added additional lines at the bottom to show next year's estimated deficit and the budgeted reserve balance at the end of next year. Again, at this point, these figures on this slide are before any staff reductions in the 24-25 budget. As we look at our finances for next year, it's important to look at what reserves we have available. We started off this year with a budgeted shortfall of $447,000. However, we received a reimbursement of our prior Prince River Middle School project planning costs of $1.055 million. This brings us to our current year budgeted surplus of $607,000. Then we can also add our unrestricted reserve from the beginning of the year of $237,000. This then brings us to our budgeted reserve balance of $845,000. Again, these are not actual figures as we are still in the 23-24 year. These are just estimates at this time. Then we have included our estimated deficit of 24-25 of $1.123 million. This brings us to our estimated reserve balance at June 30th, 2025 of negative $278,000. Again, up until this point, we have not included any staff reductions in these figures. Next, we will go over our proposed staff reductions to help balance the budget. The first column is the 24-25 preliminary budget before staff reductions that we've been going over on the prior slides. The second column is the 24-25 proposed staff reductions. The third column is the 24-25 preliminary budget totals after the staff reductions. As per discussions with the senior leadership team, we will be recommending to the board to consider the following staff reductions for 24-25 to help in balancing the budget. This slide shows the total reductions amounts in the different staffing categories. $346,000 in teachers, $20,000 in principals, vice principals, $65,000 in support staff, $211,000 in other professionals. The employee benefits related to these changes are about $151,000. This brings us to a total of $795,000. Now we will go over the reserves again with these proposed staff reductions included. This slide is the same as the prior reserve slide with 2 new rows at the very bottom. On the prior reserve slide, we went over all the figures up until the estimated reserve balance before staff reductions of negative $278,000. On this slide, we added the proposed staff reductions of $795,000, which we just went over on the prior slide. This then would bring us to a budgeted reserve balance at June 30th, 2025 of $516,000. Before we continue, we wanted to provide a further breakdown of the Indigenous education and inclusive education budgets, as the board was really interested in receiving more information regarding these. The next 2 slides show the breakdown of each. First, we will start off with the Indigenous Education Department. The top section shows the revenues. For the provincial grant, in addition to the base student amount, we received $1,770,000 for each Indigenous student. The total change in provincial grants was an increase of $66,000. The next line shows the new Indigenous Education Council's funding of $72,790, which we previously talked about. We wanted to mention again today that this IEC funding is new for next year, and the ministry has provided guidance on how to spend this as per Bill 40. It's not like the other Indigenous education funding to support students. This funding is to help support for the IEC. And going back to this slide, the third line shows the small estimated surplus carried forward each year. The bottom section shows the expenses. We wanted to mention that the salary and benefits increase are due to the wage increases and not to additional staffing. Next, we will go over the Inclusive Education Department, also known as the Learning Services Department. The first column is the 23-24 restated amended budget. The second column is the 24-25 preliminary budget after staff reductions. The third column is the change between the two. We wanted to mention that although the educational assistance row has an increase of $252,000 in the changes column, this is not due to an increase in EA FTE. This is due to the budget adjustments, the Jordan's principal accounting allocation correction, and the estimate of EA vacancies, which we explained earlier in this presentation. Now we'll go over our next steps. So here's the schedule again for the ABC meeting dates that were approved by the board. The intention of today's presentation is to provide the board and public further information regarding the 24-25 preliminary budget and a recommendation on how to balance the budget. If the board is comfortable in doing so, our goal is to have the first budget bylaw reading done today and the second and third readings done at the next public board meeting on June 17th. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your evening to go over our presentation today. And now we'll open it up for any questions.
Trustee Horn,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
you bet.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany, for your presentation. It was really well done. Thank you for that. And thank you for Jerry for your assistance with helping with that as well. So you both worked very hard, I see, on getting this together. Thank you to our staff who had to work within the numbers provided. And a big thank you to Andrew for reading out the strategic plan and our goals and the fact how we work towards sticking towards those things, which is very important to the board. And we've worked very hard on making those goals in the right way. So thank you for that. The question I have is, I do understand that we've received back funding for the middle school. Is there any additional funding expected to come out of our budget in the future for the middle school from this point forward?
No.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, thank you for that.
Is that complete?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I have some questions. Page 2 of the budget, year ending June 30th, 2025. Under expenses, operation and maintenance, there's an increase of 1.2 million. I'm just curious about that.
So the main reason for that would be the middle school reimbursement.
Told you.
But that's under expenses.
Yes. So in the current year, the 23-24 amended budget, we actually credited back the expense account. So it actually lowered our expenses in the current year.
So
Expenses
if-
budget total, I should
If
say.
if I'm not mistaken, so basically you paid back the expenses that were incurred during the time that we borrowed, that we put out the money, is what you've done. Is that
Yeah.
not correct?
Yeah, so
Yes,
exactly. So in prior years, these were expensed
Yes.
to our operating expenses. So in this year, we credited back to operating expenses.
Thank you. Page 4, the difference on the bottom line of 4.5 million compared to the year before of 365,000.
Where do you see page 4?
It's in this one.
Sorry.
It's in that board package.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jerry, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's around the capital, which is super confusing, and it's really, this is about statement of changes in net assets, which is cash and a bunch of other things, and it's mainly due to funding coming in for the new middle school, which you wouldn't have had in a previous year. So that's that deferred capital revenue coming in. That's for that. Then that's our estimate of what you're going to spend in the current year or receive in funding in the current year for that.
Thank you. And then page 7, the difference on supplies line, 2025, we have 1.2 million, and 2024, we have 33,000.
Again, that's the middle school. So that's just the category that falls under. So operating supplies expense. So that's the reimbursement. So again, so in the 23-24 amended annual budget, that decreased our supplies by
Right, so our real,
1.055 million.
sorry, so just for my clarity, the real number is the 1.2 million, but we showed it as 33 because of that money that came back from the middle school.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, clarity, trustee Meyer?
I just need clarity around the educational assistant increase of 200,000. I understand that it's, coming from the Jordan's principal, but, did we not, would we just not accounting for it at all in the budget and that's why it's increased? Or should we have not taken that out of another category to put back in?
Yeah, so what had happened in the amended budget, I had actually included it in the revenues, but we didn't include in the offsetting operating expense.
Oh, okay, so the amended budget then was just wrong, right?
Yeah.
You was short 200,000. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Question, 6 months ago.
Trustee Dalton?
My question would be, because Brittany has mentioned several times that these figures are without, do not involve or incorporate the staff that are not going to be there anymore. So my question is, if we vote on this tonight, then the figures would be changing because, okay. So this is not set in stone, this is just as per, okay.
And do you want me to just clarify that, because I've done this many, many times, so what will happen tonight? We're doing a totally different landscape tonight than we normally do. And there's reasons always for things that we do, right? Because we don't want to impact people's lives, but frankly, we have to do a first reading tonight in order to allow our senior staff to move forward with this budget. He's laid it out pretty clearly to all of us that we have to make the adjustments, right? Not that I'm gonna go home tonight and sleep very well, but we have to do a first
Yeah, I
reading.
just
tonight.
wanted to make
And
sure
it's gonna
that
change.
it was
Yeah,
gonna change.
it is gonna
Thank
change.
you.
On the second and third reading, it'll come back with amendments to it,
Yeah.
but
And
maybe.
but to note too, right, that throughout the year, we amend the budget as needed.
Well, yeah, exactly, but these, I should say, it'll come back with these amendments to bring us to
Yes,
a balanced budget.
Just all I wanted to know was just
Yeah,
that thing.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
I have trustee Meyer, but Brittany, did you want to speak to the question on the, thank you.
Yes, please. So just for clarity, the budget file that was included in your package for tonight, that actually does include the figures with the reductions.
Mhm.
So as I was going throughout the slides in my presentation, all the beginning slides didn't include the reductions until the very end,
Page 7.
just for clarity purposes.
Which one are we looking at? there?
It's
the-
page 17 and the little triangle.
Yeah. I'm watching the clock. I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting.
Wonderful, seconded. Trustee Meyer, all in favor? So moved, thank you. Trustee Meyer.
If I'm understanding this correctly, it shows us that we're guessing that we're gonna have 8.5 less kids, correct? Under enrollment? Is that right? Page, whatever that enrollment,
That's how I read it. Is that not correct?
right? 8.5.
Full-time.
Yeah, in that K-12 category, yes.
Okay, and I also don't see our 150,000 owed for funding protection anywhere in there. Is that because we are putting ourselves 8.5 kids short?
No, we don't get it any longer.
No, we had to pay back 150.
I think I saw that. No, I saw 100
In here, in this
Somewhere.
package?
So the
Brittany?
100, sorry. The 150 is shown on the 23-24 amended, but it's not included for the 24-25 preliminary.
So then we balance at funding protection right now. We're at 24-25. we no longer owe.
That's what we're estimating, yeah.
Right, it's on, you saw it on this page, right?
What page is that?
It doesn't have a number, but it's close to the front.
Slide 12.
Operation.
It's after this one. And it's under unique geographic and
Oh, okay,
abundant
okay.
protection.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. I see.
No, you're right. I would like to thank you for how you presented this. I think it provides a lot of clarity. I love well, I don't love it, but it's so well done, that showing the difference. Oh, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Just showing what the actual facts are of our district without having that line in there, the reimbursement from the middle school, to show really where we're at, what has to be done, how much of a deficit we're in, and just how this funding model does not support kids in any kind of way at all.
Thank you. And yeah, again, thank you to the board too for their suggestions on that. I think that was really helpful.
Meyer?
Not a question, maybe just a comment that I would still love to see.
Which page are you looking
I'm not looking on a
Okay.
page, I'm looking at this awful numbers. I
Don't
would
really have a
still.
page number now, but whatever.
Yeah, I would still love to see, our like core base funding versus our, or our core base, like, so our funding is included for contractual issues. So how many teachers are they actually funding for because of our enrollment? How many EAs, how many counselors, that type of deal, versus how much more money we put into staff members, because I think it's really important, and we've heard a lot of feedback from people that have looked at our budget that we put a lot of money into people, a lot of money into people. And so I would love to see that in a chart so that the public can see it, so that they understand. And that they can see that we're trying our best to support our kids by putting adults who care about them and professionals in their space.
Yes, thank you for that.
I believe Sandy Pond might want to speak to this. I'm not too sure. Not to put you on the spot, Sandy.
Well, it's fluid is the best way to describe what it looks like. You showed us that chart that you did, several months ago when you broke things out for, I think, a working session. The spreadsheet that I use? Yeah. I mean, it is good. It's very difficult to put the core funding together because it's a guessing game, right? Right now, it's a guessing game. So just so people are aware, and Michelle and I have been getting the principals to start building their schools for next year based on what we know, or we think, based on what we think our enrollment will be, which is a guess. It's an estimate. So we've done that work, or we've started that work. We've also had to estimate what our class size composition needs would be. So how many extra teachers we would need in order to,
For best effort.
best efforts to make sure that we're abiding by our contractual obligations. And so that tells us that work tells us how many classroom teachers we think we need right now. And then we add the prep time needed for all of those teachers. And so how many prep positions we're adding and how many library teachers, how many learning resource teachers, and those ones are done by ratio through the collective agreement. How many counselors, and how many teaching administrators, because that's part of it too, since our principals teach, so, and our vice principals, so that's part of it. And just off the top of my head, I think we had a number of 110 in the classrooms right now, or in schools. 110 teachers in schools is what we're looking at. And then if we add our district teaching staff, it puts us closer to 126. That's what we're working with right now. Yeah. Trustee Dalton?
You mentioned that principals go and teach
Yes.
in five. My question would be, do all the schools have a principal and a vice principal?
No.
Some of the school, principal, vice principal.
Yes. Yeah, two of our elementaries have a principal and a vice principal, and our middle school and our high school do. Hartley Bay just has a principal. Who teaches,
I'm sure.
who
that-
teaches 0.5.
My question would be hypothetical, I'm just saying. If the principal or vice principal go teaching, would it be a situation where in each school having either a principal or vice principal, so we could put the money to extra teachers, so the principal doesn't have to go in the classroom? Or the vice principal? I find that shocking.
Happens all over, though.
Still
every,
shocking.
I know it is, every district has the same thing.
It's just food for thought.
I don't think it's only in Rupert that's happening.
Yeah, I won't care about Rupert though,
Okay.
sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Are we ready to make a decision to,
Yes, for me, yes.
make a motion to give first reading? Does anyone else have anything to say before I?
We have a thumbs up from trustee Horn as well.
Okay, so I guess I'll do the wordy work. So annual budget bylaw of the Board of Education, District number 52 of the board to adopt an annual budget. However, we're not adopting it, so I choose not to read that statement. I'd like to make a motion that on the first reading on this 21st day of May, 2024.
Seconder, trustee Dalton. All in favor? So moved.
This is the first one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a comment, please, Madam Chair.
Please.
Even though, trustee Beal, it is the adoption of the budget, but this is only the first reading, so it is still a complete read of the bylaw.
We don't have to read the bylaw. There's nothing under Robert's rules that says I have to read this bylaw, James.
I understand that.
Been an old thing that this board's always done. Jerry, could you please type in there? I've never actually sat on a board where we had to read this whole bylaw. I can
No, no.
just read that.
Not what I'm
No, it's inferred that you read it, but yeah, most people do not read it. It's pretty painful to sit through.
Exactly.
I would just offer perhaps that's something that the board could discuss at another date, what they prefer. How does that sit for you, trustee Horn?
Thank you. It wasn't my point, but that's okay. Thank you.
would you like to, offer clarity? If we
Uh,
aren't getting,
It was more the point that the bylaw reads to adopt the budget. And so that is what we the goal of the bylaw. And so, but this is only reading.
But it's the first reading.
Yeah,
So yes, that has.
it doesn't matter, Christie, I really don't care, not reading it, that's all there is to it.
He's not saying about
Reading it, he's
But
saying-
you-
said,
but
we're
you
not
could-
adopting it, so
well,
I'm not reading that.
I
That's
don't,
what
I
he's
actually don't
referencing.
have to read this, read your Robert's Rules of
No,
Order,
no,
I
no.
gave it first reading, that should
Yes.
suffice.
sorry, it's not the reading of the bylaw. My understanding is this is actually.
I understand what he said, but I don't actually have to read this.
No,
whole
no, but it's not
context.
reading. What my understanding is, it was omitting the word adopting. So we
You
have,
gotta change that word.
Okay,
Right.
apologies. All I'm saying is I don't really want to read all of this.
but we
because I never
are
said I would.
adopting this.
Yes,
in
we
the
are
first-
adopting this
Wonderful.
eventually.
Right, so
Next one.
clarity, yes,
Thank you.
great, thank you. And thank you, Brittany. And now we'll move on to 8.1, Finance and Building Committee.
I think we've shared most of it except for some grants.
We have a 8.1.1, the budget survey input. Be sure to speak to that.
Madam Chair, in your package are the comments received from the public, through the online survey, through the website. There's just a few of them there for you.
Any questions or comments? That's page 55 of 58 in the bundle. Okay. Thank you. 8.1.2, the Prince Rupert Aboriginal Community Services Society grant. Would you care to speak to that, or would you like to let me speak?
Actually, she can, because I can't find it.
Okay. Can you speak to the grants, please, Brittany?
Yes, I can. So
Thank you.
item 8.1.2, Prince Rupert Aboriginal Community Services Society grant. This first one is for the Equity Mentor at Charles Hayes. So the total amount for this is 76,600 and 49,000 of this is for wages. Any
Thank
questions
you.
on that before I move on?
No.
Not say any.
Thank you. Moving on, item 8.1.3, Prince Rupert Aboriginal Community Services Society grant. And this one is for the food sovereignty at Charles Hayes. So this one is a total of 74,500. Oh, my apologies. I actually did the amount in the wrong order. They're very similar amounts. So for the prior item 8.1.2 for the Equity Mentor, that one was for 74,500. Same
you.
amount for wages, 49,000 for wages. And so 8.1.3 for this food sovereignty at Charles Hayes, that one is for 76,600. And again, 49,000 in wages.
Thank you. Any questions? Not seeing any.
And the next item, 8.1.4, Prince Rupert Port Authority grant. And this is for our commercial kitchen build. And they have generously donated 250,000.
Thank you.
That made me smile.
And I just want to say thank you so much for community partnership and those are huge amounts and very much will ripple through our district. Trustee Horn?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd also say thank you. And there's a substantial amount of money that's being given for that project. And with the board, is the board wanting to thank them for that?
I would think yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd make a motion that we send thank you letters to each and every.
Great. So we have a motion to send thank you letters to each of these organizations. Seconder, trustee Horn, I would think.
Yeah.
And all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
8.2, to the Framework for Enhanced Student Learning, trustee Horn?
No meeting in the recent past.
Thank you. Peace.
Actually,
Please, Brittany.
I believe, a motion needs to be passed that the board approves of those 3 grants as well.
Oh,
Oh.
sorry.
Thank you.
There were 50,000, 75,000, each and every one of them.
One is
I'll
74.
amend I'll amend.
The first one's 74,500.
Okay, we don't need to,
Okay,
just for the other two.
Great.
I'll make a motion that, we,
8.1.3 and 8.1.4.
yes,
Wonderful. Motion to accept.
accept them.
Seconder to accept them. Trustee Dalton, great. And all in favor? So moved. Wonderful. Thank you for that, Brittany.
Yep, thank you.
Does that complete the Finance and Building Committee? Wonderful,
Yes.
thanks. 8.3, Provincial Council, trustee Horn?
Provincial Council, yes, we met at AGM last. And it was just to go through the rigmarole forward at that time. There was nothing brought forward from us or that we needed to vote on. And so nothing to report.
Thank you. 8.4, we haven't met. We'll be meeting in June. 8.5, Policy Committee. I understand we didn't have quorum.
No.
So I'm not sure. Who
So-
would, please. Yes, trustee Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, we did not have quorum, so the committee did not meet. But policies for approval did come back with no changes. So if the board wishes to, I'll put forward the motion to approve policy 4310 and 5110. There's no changes were made. So if the board wishes, go forward with that.
Wonderful, and I have seconded by trustee Beal. And did anyone care to speak to those? Or to that motion? All right, all in favor?
And then for that committee, because of anything else.
Sorry, you cut up there. Could you go one more time?
Sorry, the committee did not sit, so there's no other business from that committee.
Wonderful, thank you. Old business,
Done?
new business?
Done?
Right. 10.1, actually, new business. We have the board working session. So this is just a quick, I think this is just so this doesn't fall off of our radar. At the leadership council meeting from the CSEA a couple of weekends ago. What really came out of that was that the board would love to have a working plan for the board. And that we look at having a working session and possibly with the CSTA around building our working plan. And to do that sooner than later, but to look at what that looks like for a date. I don't know if that looks like summer. I don't know if that looks like end of summer, but that will be for the board to consider. Did anyone care to speak to that was present?
Sorry, there's something.
You're all good?
I totally agree that we need this working session. I think it's important. It's a priority for me. I think planning for next year is important to plan now, not 6 months from now. And I think we need to get our priorities in order. And I apologize for James I just get really overwhelmed when I have to cut the budget. It's been a long time that I've been sitting here not seeing me have to cut a budget. And my pal here, and James, you're absolutely right, but I really didn't want to read the bylaw. I have to be honest with you. So, meeting in this working session is good for us to reflect back on, what our priorities are as a board and where we want to take this board and how we want to support kids and students' welfare. Because if the government's not going to support us, we got to figure out some strategies that may benefit us moving forward. So that's important to me.
I think a summer working session would be good. I don't think doing a working session before we pass our third reading works.
No.
So a summer working session, rather like end of July or in August or.
July is good, after the 12th.
Like end of July or depending, maybe we send out a.
Yeah, and we have to
Yeah.
talk with staff as well, right?
Exactly,
It's
yeah,
a-
yeah.
It's a, yes,
But it would be preferable in my eyes to sit before the school year starts.
me as
I
well.
don't know if it can be done. I don't know, but if it can be.
So, I can take that on as, scheduling, just to see where people are around the summer, specifically the board, and then I can work with you on that. Okay, wonderful. Anything else on the working session?
Maybe like, what do you call that, a survey monkey, something?
Oh, yeah, I'll do a doodle poll.
Hey, you
I'll
got
send
it.
you a doodle poll.
Right?
It's a doodle poll.
So it.
Wonderful. Information items, commencement for Charles Hayes. I am very sorry that I am not able to attend as I am away at an event, and I'm very grateful that trustee Meyer, who has her daughter is graduating, is going to be able to speak on behalf of the board. So I thank you very much for that.
And I'll be on Haida Gwaii.
And vice chair will be in Haida Gwaii. 11.2 PCF commencement is on June 20th. Again, I'm very sorry I won't be here, and I'm very grateful that Vice Chair Beal will be speaking at this event, and I do really want to express my, I love these events, and I'm really sorry that I won't be able to be there. And then show you that one, right? 11.3, the Board of Education meeting, which is us, on June 17th. 11.4, National Indigenous Peoples Day is an incredible celebration that we're taking on again this year. Yes, huge event and a lot of work, I know, and a wonderful celebration on June 21st, 2024. So stay tuned for more details. The last day of school. It's June, like it's June in 2 weeks. It is wild. June 27th is the last day of school, and 11.6 is the administration day, which is June 28th. We now have time for the question and answer period related to the agenda. Going once. Question and answer going twice. And for a third time. Not seeing any, before we adjourn, I want to thank you all. I see many, of our district present in person, online, those that didn't attend. I know this is not pleasant at all, and I just speak for the board when I say we appreciate you so very, very, very much. And we really see all that you do for our kids, so thank you so much. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you. Good night.
Here, everybody.
I got it.